When Jesus stepped onto foreign soil, he met one man, possessed by an army of demons. And what happened next terrified the entire region. This is part 33 of our series. We're exploring Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. Let's read verse 1 from the English Standard Version of the Bible. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. When did this happen? After Jesus calmed the storm on the Sea of Galilee. The previous night, while crossing in a boat, Jesus and the disciples were attacked by a sudden storm that threatened to kill them all, until Jesus commanded the wind and the waves to cease. It was a failed attack on the Messiah and his team. And where did they arrive? Presumably, in the morning? The country of the Gerasenes. Where is that? Why does it matter? Mark's account of Jesus has mostly taken place on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, centered in Capernaum. The western shore was predominantly Jewish in terms of population and culture. They crossed the sea to the eastern shore, which was the location of the Decapolis, which means the 10 cities. It was an area mostly populated by Greek-speaking, non-Jewish Gentiles. So Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, is on foreign soil. He and his group are outsiders here. Let's move on to verses 2 through 4. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains. But he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. It's been a while. But here's another occurrence of the word immediately. As soon as Jesus touched land, a man with an unclean spirit came from the tombs. And that man lived in the tombs. Tombs are a place for the dead, not the living. In the Jewish religion, proximity to the dead is defiling and makes you unclean. So the man with an unclean spirit lives in an unclean place, which makes people unclean. This is a very unclean story. We're told the man is powerful and dangerous and uncontrollable. Back to the word immediately. The man approached Jesus immediately upon his arrival on the eastern shore. So what? Why does that matter? It appears that the man was waiting for Jesus. If the storm the night before was a spiritual battle at sea, this man's immediate approach when Jesus arrived looks like a land-based spiritual battle. What do we know about this man's life? Look at verse 5. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. Both night and day, without rest, in the tombs and on the mountains, all around the area. This man raged and cried out and harmed himself. He's being tormented from within, and he's terrorizing the area. On to verse 6. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. Picture the scene in your mind. A man known to be raging, dangerous to himself and others, unchainable and uncontrollable, a wild force, rushes toward Jesus. It sounds scary. But when he got to him, the man fell down before Jesus. Here's an interesting fact. The Greek word translated fell down is the word that describes a posture of prayer, the posture of prostrating oneself, face down on the ground, to pray. The man didn't attack Jesus. He fell on his face before him. Why would he do that? Look at verses 7 and 8. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. For he was saying to him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. First things first, this man knows exactly who Jesus is, Son of the Most High God. His physical posture is appropriate to his understanding of Jesus' identity. Second, he says, I adjure you by God. What does that mean? It's a way of asking someone to make a promise or to swear an oath. What oath does he seek from Jesus? That he won't torment him. And Mark tells us that the possessed man asks this because Jesus was saying, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit. The unclean spirit knows who Jesus is and knows that Jesus intends to cast him out of this useful and dangerous man. Look at Jesus' response in verses 9 and 10. And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. The New Testament time frame was dominated by the Roman Empire, and when the possessed man said his name was Legion, it was loaded with meaning. A Roman legion consisted of between 4,000 to 6,800 soldiers. Not one. So, the name Legion implies that Jesus isn't facing one unclean spirit, but many. The spiritual battle on the shore this morning is an amazing sight to see. Jesus is alone. There's no mention of the disciples. He's facing many unclean spirits, but the possessed man is on his face, begging. The dark side is facing another loss, like the battle on the sea the night before. So the man possessed by a legion of demons petitioned for terms of surrender. The demons accept that they will have to leave the man, but they plead to remain in the territory. What did they request? Look at verses 11 and 12. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs. Let us enter them." Remember when I said this was an unclean story? It gets more unclean now. Unclean spirits made a man unclean. He lived in an unclean place, and because of that, contact with him would make others unclean, at least according to Jewish beliefs. Now, the legion asks to enter a herd of pigs, which are also unclean according to Old Testament law. The region of the Decapolis is predominantly Gentile, and pig farming and consuming pork are common. So, the presence of a large herd of pigs, tended by swineherds, is totally normal. What did Jesus do? Look at verse 13. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. Jesus allowed it. The legion of demons left the man, possessed a herd of about 2,000 pigs, and drove them into the water, to their deaths. Why on earth would they enter the pigs just to kill them? Aha, that's a great question. If everything we saw on the sea last night and on the shore this morning is a spiritual battle, then killing the pigs is a last-ditch attack on Jesus. Someone owned those pigs. The death of thousands of pigs is an economic disaster for the people who own them and a supply chain disaster for the people who would have eaten them. And who will be blamed? Jesus. Jesus showed up, and all your pigs died. But look at what happened next, in verse 14. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And people came to see what it was that had happened. So the swineherds spread out and told the story all over the region, both in the city and countryside, if for no other reason to say, "It's not our fault." And what was the result of them reporting what they saw? People came to investigate what had taken place on the shore that morning. Can you see the irony? The demons killed the pigs to make Jesus a local villain, but Jesus winds up drawing a crowd, even though he's a foreigner in a Gentile region, even though he's of a different religion and culture. Even when the dark side lashed out at him to harm his reputation, Jesus was still attracting crowds. This video is running long, so we'll pick up the second half of the story in our next video. Before we wrap up, what are the big takeaways of this story? What can we learn from it? First, in spiritual warfare, the sides are not even. Jesus is more than a match for thousands of demons. So what does that have to do with today? Just like the disciples were in no real danger in the storm at night and on the shore in the morning, followers of Jesus are with one before whom demons prostrate themselves. Fear not. What else can we learn? The enemy knows it can't win, but is petty and evil enough to lash out, so don't be surprised. In the end, you know who wins. Finally, how do the last two events that Mark described further his cause as an evangelist? Mark has shown his readers that Jesus isn't just a teacher or a healer. He's under attack and in open warfare with the forces of evil while trying to draw people to himself for forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. The enemy wants Jesus' ministry stopped. In our next video, the aftermath of legions of demons and pigs. Thank you for watching So What Scripture. Please subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends on social media.